Dark shades, neon lights, rock and roll, and lots of smoking. Auteur is entirely too serious a term to describe the minimalist maverick Aki Kaurismäki, and yet each of his films builds on a stellar catalogue of dryly humorous, heartbreaking hits. 8 years on from his last film, Kaurismäki is back with Fallen Leaves, a belated follow-up to his iconic Proletariat trilogy, which is now streaming on Mubi along with many more films from across his prolific 40-year career. Given how consistently brilliant his films are, the challenge with this Finnish master is knowing where to start. Although Kaurismäki embraces his nationality in his 1983 debut narrative feature, an idiosyncratic reworking of Dostoevsky's classic novel Crime and Punishment, and hones his absurdist style in his second film, Calamari Union, it's arguably 1986's Shadows in Paradise where Kaurismäki began to settle into the groove that would come to define his work. Refuse collector Nikander lives a quiet and isolated life, that is until supermarket cashier Ilona catches his eye. Unfortunately, communication failures and the grind of low-level employment provide ceaseless obstacles to the young couple, portrayed by frequent Kaurismäki collaborators Matti Pellonpää and Kati Aaltonen. Kaurismäki's fascination with the trials and tribulations of working-class Finns, and the dark humour he extracts from the contrasts between their personal and professional lives, is a recurring theme throughout his films, particularly the Proletariat trilogy, of which Shadows in Paradise is the first instalment. Faced with painful existences, Kaurismäki's Finns are typically taciturn and laconic. The droll, matter-of-fact delivery of their dialogue and low-energy reactions to potentially life-threatening situations creates an absurd brand of cinematic comedy that is instantly recognisable. And this is absurdism in the truest, most purely existential sense. Frequently butting up against the inevitability of death, Kaurismäki's characters are always prepared with a laid-back bon mot.
Mikäs? Kauhu, pelko ja työvuoro.
Despite their cool demeanour, many Kaurismäki characters are lonely figures, existing on the edge of society. Economic decline is rife in the majority of his films, and his characters constantly find themselves drifting from bad to worse scenarios. Despite this, they are often depicted as dreamers of a sort, striving for more in life, particularly love, and sometimes even achieving it. Drifting Clouds from 1996 is perhaps the most clear example of Kaurismäki's long-standing interest in examining the human cost of economic depression. Tram driver Lauri is made redundant by chance, while his wife Ilona loses her restaurant job when it's foreclosed on as part of a suspicious bank deal. From there, things only get more desperate for the couple.
Ollakseni rehellinen tarjoilijaksi alat olla jo vanhaa.
Olen 38.
Siinäpä se. Saatat kupsahtaa milloin tahansa.
Helped along by dark humour, Lauri and Ilona's story, as in so many of Kaurismäki's films, ends on a note of hope, defying the odds that seem to be stacked against the characters. It's this bright side of Kaurismäki that marks him as a humanist filmmaker, while also pointing to a political consciousness that is more prominent in his later work, with 2011's Le Havre and 2017's The Other Side of Hope, telling stories of refugees and immigrants. The Other Side of Hope also demonstrates one of the most readily identifiable Kaurismäki quirks: the timeless quality of his cinematic world. It's likely that the throwbacks to the 1950s and 60s evident in his early films were partly born of necessity, a result of making low-budget indie films in the 80s. But Kaurismäki's love for all things retro has only become more pronounced over time. In Kaurismäki's world, the rock and roll era is alive and well. Everyone drives vintage cars, listens to golden oldies radio stations, and wears vintage sunglasses, even at night, even indoors. The flat-screen TVs that display contemporary news coverage are juxtaposed by jukeboxes and dictaphones, while laptops share desk space with typewriters. And under this sheen of nostalgia, there's a subversive streak in the way that Kaurismäki takes on American pop culture. His films flirt with classic Hollywood genres, such as film noir, murder mystery, and even musicals, albeit not one that Fred Astaire or Ginger Rogers would recognise. Many of these films involve a robbery or a pointed gun, but they also contain subtle condemnation of capitalism and a critique of the way that broken English has become a social necessity for Finns seeking higher paid work. Like his approach to comedy, Kaurismäki's apparent obsession with Americana is laden with irony. Fallen Leaves, Kaurismäki's latest film, calls back to the Proletariat trilogy with its working-class leads, while also embracing the conflict between the past and the present with its timeless setting and typical rock and roll stylings. And as for the comedy...
Tapasin sen pienemmän myöhemmin. Mentiin melkein naimisiin.
Miksi te menneet? Nätti likka. Hiljainen tosin.
En tiedä nimeä.
Se kieltämättä vähän haittaa.